Talking about your favorite show can be more difficult than you think. To talk about a show you like is easy, at least for me. The same can be said with talking about a show I don't like, or even a show I'm mixed on. But to single out a series as specifically as my favorite of all time feels a lot more daunting than it should be. What kind of criteria do I judge it? Do I look at it objectively, what I like about it the most, or how much of a personal impact it has on me? Most of the content that I make on here has been anime and manga focused, and a lot of it has been on shows that I really like. But I've yet to cover a true all-time favorite, and after over a year of creating anime and manga videos, I thought it was time to finally stop putting it off and talk about what I consider to be my favorite anime of all time. However, I didn't know how to approach it for the longest time. To be personal and talk about what this anime means to me, or to give a detailed look about why I love it specifically. That's when I realized it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, I just had to talk about it like I do with every other show. Figuring out whether I should be candid or objective was a losing battle from the start, when I already knew that the answer was to be both in talking about why this series is my all-time favorite. I don't remember the exact age when I first watched Darker Than Black, but I do know that it was when I was around 14 to 15 years old. The thing you have to realize about finding older anime is that discussion about anime, especially on YouTube, was a lot more obtuse than it is now. Videos that talked about anime to an extended amount was categorized under two kinds of genres. Seasonal anime discussions, where people would talk about the newest and biggest animes at the time, and classic anime recommendations and reviews, where creators would talk about their favorite or unknown shows from a long time ago, usually from the 80s or 90s. 2000s anime, which was what I grew up on, was in a weird spot where it was too old to be talking about it as appointment viewing, but not old enough to where people were now nostalgic over it. That means my first exposure to Darker Than Black was seeing it get featured on the front page of some old illegal anime streaming website that I don't even remember and that's likely lost to time or copyright. In retrospect, it's quite ironic that the source where I almost gave up on anime was also the same source that gave me my favorite anime of all time, but I'll touch on that a little bit later. Darker Than Black is the vision of one man, Tensai Okamura. A fan of spies, ninjas, and superheroes growing up, Okamura is an artist with a deep portfolio in anime storyboarding and directing, from Evangelion to Cowboy Bebop to My Hero Academia. However, the idea to create Darker Than Black came upon Okamura when he was directing Wolf's Rain, another anime that I'll likely have to cover in the near future given the theming of this channel. Wolf's Rain is a dark, complex story intended to be thought upon even after you finish watching the series. But according to Okamura, its protagonists being wolves made them leads who lack the flaws that humans have, while still being heroes in a dark world. Okamura wanted to see if he could create that same kind of dark tone and world, while also creating leads that would house the same kinds of flaws and issues that would come from having to live in said world. And he wanted to see if he could do it by himself, as Wolf's Rain wasn't really his vision, but instead head writer Keiko Nobumoto's. And so, a new constellation was created, and its name was Darker Than Black. Darker Than Black is a story that begins and ends with Hei, a young man stationed to live undercover in Tokyo under the orders of the mysterious syndicate organization. 10 years ago, a spatial anomaly hit both South America and Tokyo, creating an abnormal environment where the laws of physics and reality were altered. These uninhabitable lands came to be known as the Heaven's Gate in South America and the Hell's Gate in Japan, and from these anomalies came two critical ramifications. The first was the altering of the sky. The stars of the night were gone, replaced by an artificial sky whose stars represented a new group of people called contractors. Individuals who possessed supernatural powers and had their minds altered by gaining said powers. The existence of these contractors was concealed from the public, with only select individuals aware of their presence and danger. And it's here in this time of fear and paranoia that Hei, a contractor himself, makes his presence. By day, he's an earnest but meek foreign exchange student named Lee Shangsheng. but by night he dons a white mask and becomes the Black Reaper. One half masked vigilante and the other half professional spy and assassin working for the syndicate, out to do his job, but also out to look for his sister who has gone missing several years ago. Now, one of the biggest points of contention for Darker Than Black is that to a lot of people, the story can be really hard to follow. I can understand and sympathize with this sentiment, especially if it's your first time watching it. Darker Than Black is a story that not only expects you to keep up with the various organizations plotting against each other, like the Syndicate, Pandora, and eventually the Evening Primrose, but to also be aware of terms like remuneration, meteor fragments, and the gates themselves. This is a show that requires you to really pay attention to each scene, especially when it comes to exposition, which I just think is a result of it being an anime for adults. A lot of people like to complain that anime is too focused on directly marketing towards kids and high school students, and that they make their stories too simple to be engaging. These people think that more anime should be made for adults and that they should be more dark and more complex. Well, here's your adult anime, and not only is it complex, it requires you to pay attention to what it has to say to keep up. But when you do pay attention, not only are you given a great science fiction story that is able to show and not just tell its audience while also giving them plenty to think about on their own, but you're also able to see the themes that the show is trying to present, and that's the theme of identity. The overall story of Darker Than Black is actually a pretty small part of what makes the story so good. Don't get me wrong, it's a good plot that tells a thrilling story of science fiction meets noir, but the real strength of Darker Than Black's writing lies in the stories told between its characters. That is where you find what makes Darker Than Black's story truly stand out, and why I still think about it to this day. Its ability to establish preconceived notions about a character, and then once that's been established, to immediately deconstruct that notion to see if that's really who they are. Take a look at contractors. What makes them so engaging as characters is that at first glance, you assume that's going to be a Mune thing. You know, race of people with supernatural powers who face prejudice, the whole discrimination as a metaphor to racism and all that. But like I said earlier, it wasn't just their bodies that were altered, but so were their minds. Contractors are not just your everyday people who wake up with the power to shoot lightning out of their hands, but are still the same person underneath. No, when their powers awaken, so does something deep in their minds that has never given a real explanation. To put it simply, contractors are fundamentally different than normal people. They're people who think rationally and without emotion fueling their decisions. That doesn't mean that all contractors are heartless sociopaths. It's just that their sense of morality and ethics are so much different than our own. This, in my opinion, is their real danger, and it adds such an interesting angle into who they are. At first you assume they're your usual prejudiced superpowered race, but then you find out that people really do have every right to fear them, and so you assume that they're all sociopaths. Except they do have camaraderie and experience emotion, so then this requires the audience to come up with their own conclusion of who contractors are and what they represent. In addition, all contractors who use their powers must pay their price. This is what's called remuneration, and another thing I love is just how random these remunerations are. Some of these remunerations can be as simple as humming a little song, to the ironics, like November 11th, an avid hater of smoking having to smoke to pay for his contractor powers, to some that are just plain absurd. You don't even want to know what Havoc's remuneration is. It's this, along with the contractor's personality and how almost all of the ones we see are dangerous killers, that really makes them not only engaging, but in general just cool as hell. By the end of the series, you'll have a favorite contractor. They're just the perfect mixture of mysterious and badass without one overshadowing the other. And I think no better person represents that mystery and coolness as well as Darker Than Black's theme of identity better than its main character, Hei. I'll just go out and say it, Hei is not only one of my favorite characters in not just anime, but in all of fiction. Simply put, he's one of the most interesting and engaging main characters I've ever seen, while also being one of the coolest. A living contradiction of identities, Hei's a contractor who has to pay for his remuneration, just like all the other contractors. But he certainly doesn't act like one despite his personality as the Black Reaper would have you assume.
Multiple times throughout the series, Hei makes irrational choices motivated only by emotion, and this can be seen as early as the first episode when he kills Louis, another fellow contractor who was his only lead in his objective of locating Chiaki Shinoda, all because he hated the way Louis looked. So despite all his talk, Hei quite actively does not have the personality of a typical contractor. Then there's his civilian personality of Lee. At first, the Lee persona is nothing more than a fabrication, and it seems like the Black Reaper is Hei's real personality. Except that's not true either, and on very rare occasions you do see Hei's real personality. A troubled, deeply hurt young man who still cares for people and will try to help them out even at his own expense. This can be seen from episode 6 with his encouraging words to Havoc to keep living, to helping out Kenji Sakura in episode 18, all because he saw that Kenji had someone he wanted to protect. Like I said earlier though, these are all very rare, and part of Hei's character is struggling to deal with the multiple masks he puts on. Is he Li Shangsheng? Is he the Black Reaper? Or is he both? This inner turmoil is just so fascinating to watch unfold, and I love vigilante stories like these where the protagonist has to deal with their identity crisis over which side of them is actually the real one. Superman has a lot of these kinds of stories dealing with identity, and it's why I always scoff at the idea that he's considered a boring character by some people. This inner conflict, along with the fact that Hei's also a badass vigilante with one of the coolest designs of all time, makes him easily my favorite protagonist in any anime. I feel like he's all of Okamura's inspirations all rolled into one. He's got the awesome supernatural powers that a crime-fighting superhero would have, while also always being 2 steps ahead of his enemies and always thinking ahead to achieve victory, just like how a shinobi would, and all of this is topped off with a cold and professional demeanor befitting of a hardened secret agent. 1 part ninja, 1 part spy, and 1 part vigilante, all seamlessly blended to create one of my favorite characters of all time. Oh, and one last thing about Hei. Atlas, I think you owe Studio Bones some royalties. But of course, an amazing main character can only carry a series for so long, and Darker Than Black not only has my favorite protagonist, but also houses one of my favorite supporting casts I've seen in an anime. You have Hei's badass team working with him on his missions, consisting of Huang and a talking cat named Mao, who are both not only memorable but also well developed. You have Misaki Kirihara, head officer of Tokyo's contractor-related crime force, who quickly develops an obsession with catching Hei that turns into a really fun and dynamic relationship between her and Hei's civilian persona. Kirihara is such a great character that even though she's a secondary protagonist, it honestly feels like there should have been more screen time with her. She's a strong, competent character who's also very interesting to watch in a world full of supernatural hitmen and assassins that she gets by using her cunning and will. By the by, I'm not really much of a shipper, but her relationship with Hei is easily the series' best attempt at a romance, even with how short it is. Their chemistry and dynamic is just so good, and I would love to have seen more of them just interacting together, especially seeing her direct reaction to finding out that Hei is a contractor. Speaking of contractors, it would be remiss of me if I did not mention the MI6 team that are technically antagonists to Hei, but are just so damn cool that I think nobody really cares. November 11th and April are not only really fun characters who can easily be main characters to their own spin-off series, but their designs are just plain cool as hell. Just take a look at April's design and tell me that this woman does not have aura. But of course, I can't talk about supporting cast members if I did not talk about Yin, the team's doll. You see, contractors were not the only kinds of people that were created when the Gates first arrived. Dolls are psychic mediums created by the Gates who act as surveillance networks and mission control. The payoff is that they are almost completely emotionless and are mostly dependent on others. Now, I said almost and mostly there, as just like contractors, dolls can go against their preconceived identities and exhibit a small amount of emotion and autonomy. Yin acts as the main doll we see throughout the series, and seeing her slowly grow more independent and emotional is not only really heartwarming to see, but also highlights just how well developed the characters in Darker Than Black are, and how well they play off of one another.
You have Hei, a man who tries everything he can to close off his emotions, interact with Yin, a girl who is emotionless not by her own choice. He's chased by Kirahara, who's out to figure out his true identity, not knowing that she's already seen his face by the end of the second episode. Hei's contradictions, living as a contractor and as a human, acts as the perfect foil to November 11th, a model contractor who fully embraces what the life is all about. It's just so engaging watching all these interesting and memorable characters play off of one another. It's like watching dominoes fall, but each domino is its own unique piece. And that's without even mentioning Darker Than Black's primary antagonist, Amber. Now, I want to stress that Amber is not a traditional villain, because of course she's not. Nothing in this series is ever traditional. Being that she's Hei's ex-girlfriend, her status as the villain would have you believe that she's the one who resents Hei. Except, it's the other way around. Hei is the one who feels nothing but contempt for her, while Amber still loves him, and would want nothing more than for Hei to join her organization, the Evening Primrose. While she's definitely not the most intimidating or dangerous villain I've seen, she's certainly one of the most unique, and helps convey the gray morality present throughout the series. It goes to show that our heroes aren't always good people, and our villains aren't always bad. My only issue with Amber is that she appears so late in the story with very few episodes of her own to really get to know her. Still, that does not detract from just how fascinating she is, an antagonist who genuinely loves the protagonist. Just another interesting string in this web of relationships and deception you would call Hei's life. Now, I mentioned that the real strength of Darker Than Black storytelling comes from the individual stories told between its characters, and that's because the show uses a format unlike any other anime I've ever seen. Taking a page from Cowboy Bebop, most of the show is episodic, meaning that aside from a few continuity nods and apart from the last few episodes, each story arc in the series is standalone. However, unlike Bebop, the show extends most of its arcs to 2 episodes. The first episode introduces the conflict while the second is the one that resolves it. This actually comes from most Japanese dramas, which have their episodes be an hour long. Okamura wanted to recreate that same feeling, as well as invoking classic comic book storytelling, where each arc is its own self-contained story, which I think was a fantastic decision. It allows most of the arcs to not only feel self-contained, but also fully realized and developed, as well as bringing in a ton of variety. One arc can be about deconstructing the nature of contractors, while the very next arc can be an affectionate parody of gritty detective noirs. It also means that none of the story arcs feels dragged nor rushed in my opinion, as well as the fact that it just makes the series very addicting to watch. Almost half the episodes in Darker Than Black end on a big cliffhanger, while the other half have a satisfying end to them, meaning you'll never want to stop watching the series on the first episode of a new story arc. You'll want to see it through. One last thing that makes the series' bi-episodic story structure succeed is that it keeps Hei, and by extension, the contractor's mystique going all the way until the end. Because almost every story arc is about a new character, it means Hei is for the most part in the background for a lot of these. That doesn't mean he's not important, but he's not in the center stage most of the time, which I think only makes his character even better. With a character archetype like Hei, you run the risk of overexposing him too much. By not making him the 100% focus for each story arc, Okamura is able to continue to add on top of Hei's already massive aura by letting him be the show stealer of each arc every time he dons the white mask. If you ask me what my favorite episodes are, it would have to be the stretch of episodes from episode 9 to episode 12. Episodes 9 and 10 are some of the most action-packed in the series, with Hei and Kirahara unexpectedly having to work together for the first time to stop Kirahara's former best friend and her extremely dangerous contractor bodyguard. These episodes not only feature some of the best fights in the series, but also a lot of great character moments for Kirahara and Hei, as this is the first real time they interact with each other. Episodes 11 and 12 are a lot more slower paced, but act as a great character study of Hei and his thoughts behind contractors, while also being a great piece of sci-fi noir that the series is all about. By the end, it leaves Hei with more questions than answers, and has him wondering about some of the ideas he's had about contractors ever since the start of the series. mainly if they really are as treacherous and sociopathic as he thinks they are. One thing that does interest me about the series' episodic format is the subtle shift in tone from the first half of the series to the second. Around the halfway point of the series, lead writing duties go from Okamura to Shotaro Suga. According to Okamura, Suga had the closest worldview to Okamura and was given the opportunity to pen out the series' conclusion. You may not notice it on your first watch, but the series does change slightly once Suga is on board. For one thing, the bleak tone is ever so slightly lifted. Darker Than Black is obviously a dark series, but not in a grim dark kind of way. It's not dark because there's a lot of murder or sex. It's dark because its subject matter and writing just happens to be very dark. It's hard to explain without just saying what happens in each episode, but this is a series that really does not pull its punches regarding the state of the world and the life of a contractor. Good people die in unfair ways, while bad people continue to live and profit from their terrible behavior. The second half changes this slightly. Without going into spoilers, instead of almost every episode ending on a miserable downer with only the scrap heaps of a happy ending, now most of them are bittersweet, that are only just mostly sad instead of completely. This leads into the question of whether or not the series' second half is worse than the first, just because it was noticeable to me just how many changes were present in the second half of the series. While my favorite episodes in the series do come from the series' first half, I don't think overall the series gets worse. Sure, that dark, gritty tone of the first half slowly goes away, but that doesn't mean that the writing of each arc still isn't as engaging. Hell, the last few episodes are, in my opinion, some of the best in the series, with a conclusion to Hei's arc that I personally found to be perfect for a character like him, as well as one that matches the series' themes of identity. Now, while I love the characters and writing of Darker Than Black, I won't lie and say that the real draw to the series is the presentation. Yuji Iwahara is the artist who handled the character designs, and he did a fantastic job with each of the main characters and even the side characters. Take a look at someone like November 11th. Like I said earlier, November is meant to act as a foil to Hei, as a man who embraces the life of a contractor while also openly working with Kirihara as they try and take down Hei and his organization. This can be seen in his design. November's white suit and red tie contrast perfectly to Hei's all-black trench coat, as well as highlighting what the spy lifestyle they both symbolize. For November, it's all about being a suave professional, and as for Hei, it's about the remorseless killer that comes from being a spy. Even the little details Iwahara puts in, I really appreciate. In particular, I love the way Irahara designed Hei to create a contrast between his Black Reaper persona and his Li Shangsheng identity without changing a single part of his facial design. Instead, it all comes down to Hei's eyes. When he's Li, they're soft and round, but when he switches to Black Reaper mode, do they become hardened and narrow. However, one thing that remains in both personas are the baggage stress lines that show the kind of hard life Hei has had to endure as a killer for the Syndicate. It's this attention to detail that I love so much. Now, while Iwahara was the main character designer, the person who really put Darker Than Black to life was Takahiro Komori. I'm just gonna come out and say it. Komori's art style for Darker Than Black is my favorite in any anime. There has always been a debate between anime fans over whether or not anime should strive for realism or personal style. More often than not, it comes down to taste and what kind of art style the anime really demands. In my opinion, Komori nails the perfect balance of realism and style, and it's not just his work on Darker Than Black, but this can be seen in all his artwork for anime. I know I'm gonna sound like a massive gatekeeper or elitist when I say this, but to me, Komori's art is what anime should look like. To me, it is anime. The way characters move and interact feels just like how they would in real life, which serves as a great contrast to all the crazy supernatural shit that happens in the series. How the use of color is effectively utilized. By day, it's all bright and sunny, but by night, there's a strong green lighting that overcasts every scene and gives each night scene this real sense of danger. Komori was able to translate Iwahara's designs to animation while still keeping the spirit of Iwahara's art alive. You want to talk about timelessness? It's been almost 20 years since Darker Than Black came out, and the series still looks like it could have come out today. That's what having a timeless art style looks like. And it's thanks to Komori's art style that the series is able to really shine in its fight scenes. I will be honest when I say this, but in my opinion, Darker Than Black has no bad fight scenes. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that most of them are all not that long, but each one is just pure Sakuga goodness. Thanks to his training and upbringing, Hei is unique in that he only uses his contractor powers sparingly, instead relying on his knives and ropes to control the battlefield. This not only makes all his fights incredibly exciting to watch, but also makes him look even more like a badass when he's able to kick this much ass before even using his electric superpowers. Said electricity is not your typical lightning you see in an action show like this. No, Hei is shocking motherfuckers and giving them heart attacks with just a fraction of his power. Just imagine how messed up they would be if he went all out. There's not really much more that needs to be said with just how good the action scenes are. They're fast, exciting, and always the highlight of an episode. There's a reason why there are people who get confused by Darker Than Black's story, but still continue to watch it because its fight scenes are just that good. It also helps that whenever a fight scene breaks out that the music goes into high gear. Yoko Kanno is the main composer of Darker Than Black, a name that's pretty recognizable to pretty much anyone who's remotely interested in anime soundtracks. Kanno's portfolio speaks for itself. Cowboy Bebop, Ghost in the Shell, Turn 8 Gundam, but her work on Darker Than Black is easily my favorite. Kanno is able to infuse her usual fantastic composition of jazz and piano tracks, but also adds it with a hard rock kick that adds that extra edge needed for a show like this. The result is this wonderful mix of jazz and rock, unlike any other anime I've seen, that always enhances whatever scene that requires her music. However, I cannot talk about Darker Than Black's music if I did not bring up its opening themes. Let me start in reverse, because I think it would lead in a lot better. Darker Than Black's second opening is actually really good. The Hero Without a Name by Anne Cafe is a great energetic rock piece that really captures the thrilling atmosphere the series has, and the opening itself is great, highlighting the duality of Hei's character. I especially love the build-up to the chorus, as Hei is trapped in his own wires and his masks break apart, forcing him to confront both Lee and the Black Reaper's persona, so that he can emerge as Hei to kick some ass while the chorus locks in. It's a really good opening. It just has the great misfortune of following up on one of the greatest anime openings of all time. Howling by Abingdon Boys School is a masterpiece of a song, combining melancholy, edge, and just pure hype to create a perfect rock song that captures everything Darker Than Black is all about. It is, in my opinion, the greatest anime opening of all time. It's exciting, moody, and just plain hooks you from start to end. It's everything that an OP needs. And that doesn't mean that Darker Than Black's EDs are bad either. It's just that the opening is just so good that I feel like they kind of overshadow them. I will say this though, that the first ED is a great tranquil piece of music that does fit with the series despite some soundtrack dissonance. Okay, despite all this praise I have towards Darker Than Black, I have to at least bring up some issues with the series, even if it is my favorite anime. Despite what I said earlier about the series really needing you to pay attention to fully understand it, I can't deny that yes, the series can be very confusing even if you do pay full attention. Darker Than Black is a series that expects you to connect the dots to certain plot points and characters, but sometimes the series just gives you no clue on how to connect them, or even when to tell you to start connecting them in the first place. That's why the series heavily benefits from a rewatch, where foreshadowing can be seen a lot easier, and certain terms will have already been understood, like contractors and dolls. Despite loving the dark atmosphere and tone, I can understand how much of a turnoff this might be to some people. While Darker Than Black is not overtly grimdark like I said earlier, it can be a very miserable series to watch sometimes. However, the critical flaw that I think held Darker Than Black the most, and probably why the series never really took off, is that it's an anime caught between two worlds. Simply put, what exactly do you categorize a show like Darker Than Black? Is it a dark, cold science fiction thriller like Ergo Proxy or Serial Experiment Lane? Or is it a cool action series filled with aura and hype moments like Cowboy Bebop or Hellsing? Darker Than Black is somehow both, with neither side really winning out. So you end up with this moody, cerebral sci-fi drama that requires you to think about its themes and messages, but is also filled with thrilling action and hype. But you know what? That's why I love it. That's why this series is my favorite anime of all time. Actually, no. I'll tell you exactly why it's my favorite anime of all time, and why it's so special to me. When I was around 13 to 14 years old, I had almost given up on anime and manga. For manga, I just couldn't find anything that interested me. This was before I really had access to Weekly Shonen Jump on an instant basis, and I knew where to find the newest manga that was coming out. So the only manga I was keeping up with was Naruto, which was reaching its end around this time. As for anime, oh boy, I was in the fucking trenches. Like I said earlier, anime content on YouTube where people could recommend amazing anime to watch was a lot smaller than it is now. I basically had to go out of my way to find specific shows to watch. In the meantime, I just watched whatever was on the front pages of most anime streaming sites, which were all battle harem garbage. Oh, you mean like High School DxD or High School of the Dead? No, I'm talking about shit like Infinite Stratos, Blade Dance of Elementalers, or fucking Unlimited Fafnir. For a while, I thought, was this just what anime was now? Nothing but slop, battle harem fanservice shows that only seem to cater to people who wanted to have waifus? I almost gave up on watching anime. I thought that I had simply outgrown it. All of the series I loved, I had finished watching, and nothing new seemed interesting to me. That was until, like I said at the start of this video, Darker Than Black popped up on the front page of one of these streaming sites. I watched it, and I did nothing else but watch it for an entire weekend. I am not exaggerating when I say that Darker Than Black is the reason why I still watch anime. It helped me out in a very confusing time of my anime fandom, and made me realize what I really wanted out of anime. It shaped my taste and helped guide me into what I wanted to watch and read. After that, I got into shows like Cowboy Bebop and Fate Zero. I read through all of Berserk. I fucking devoured through JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. And all of this, I can attribute to having watched Darker Than Black on one fateful summer weekend. And it's for that reason that I can say that Darker Than Black is my favorite anime. Because it reminds me that anime is the coolest fucking thing in the world. And Darker Than Black is, simply put, the coolest anime I've ever seen. As much as I would love to tell people where to watch Darker Than Black, it's unfortunately unavailable on most legal streaming sites, and since it's an Aniplex series, the series has no real home release outside of paying a ridiculous amount to get it on eBay. So your best bet is to find it through your own means and convenience. Still, that does not detract the fact that Darker Than Black is and will likely continue to be my favorite anime of all time. 25 episodes of a pure neo-noir masterpiece with an ending that is both satisfying and leaves room for a potential sequel. And for those that might be asking about Darker Than Black Season 2, all I have to say is, what Season 2?